So today I'm building this cool circular board and this bedside table right here. Let's get straight into the video.
So we're going to start building the design. Got the marabou, chuck in this pine here, and also a lighter, different shade of pine. Now the first thing I'm going to do is going to cut them all to 550 millimeters in length.
So to make them 550, just made super straight 90-degree cuts on the table.
Now that we've got everything the same length, I'm going to cut this pine up to 20 millimeters by 20 millimeters, little squares.
So I put the table fence 20 millimeters away from the blade and ripped through the pine over and over again.
Pine's been cut to 20 millimeters in width. We're going to cut all these pieces in 20 millimeters in height.
So this would be the final cut I made with these pines, making them 20 by 20 by 550. And finally, we're done with our 25 mini pine pieces in height and width, 480 in length. Next is the pine, 20 by 40. So with this, I did the exact same thing I did with the pine, just set the table fence to the desired length and then chop through them at a 40 millimeter rate. You can see me here move the table fence 20 millimeters from the blade to make the height cuts. So the pine's done, the marabou's done, just one more wood to go.
So I've got the nice pine all chopped up. I've got the marabou all chopped up. Now it's time to get this pine into the right dimensions, and then we can start having some
Pine at 20 by 20 millimeters, the marabou at 40 by 20 millimeters, and this wood I'm chopping up right here, the same as the marabou, 40 by 20 millimeters. So I did the same thing as I did with the marabou, set the table fence up to 40 millimeters and ripped through the pieces.
5 pine bits, 15 marabou, and 15 different colored pine. The next step is to cut a 45-degree angle on the marabou, a 45-degree angle on the pine, and then start to glue it all up together.
As you can see here is a 45-degree angle on the blade, and I'm just chopping through the marabou and the lighter size pine with all the pieces like I mentioned before.
These at a 45-degree angle, put these at a 45-degree angle.
So just like the marabou I did just then, chopped up this kind of pine with a 45-degree angle and got ready for the next part.
15, 15, 25.
So to glue it up, one of these pieces, one of these.
It's gonna look like. To glue it up, it's not going to be rocket science. I'm just pour glue on all of it, put them all together, and then clamp it down as hard as I can. And then as you can see right here, I'm just repeating the process for the second, third, fourth, all of them up until I've done 15 of these.
We're starting to make some progress. We got 5, 10, 15.
Let's take a look at the end grain so far.
So all these pieces are already all glued up together. They weren't perfect, and there were a lot of glue marks and wrong measured bits that I had to cut off. So I squared everything to 90 and made sure that it was ready for the next part of the project. Just to ensure they were 90 degrees, I chucked them through the planer and made sure that everything was smooth when they came out.
So the planer just made these 5 look much nicer than these 5 and these 5. Time to make these nice and these nice.
So I showed you the difference between the first 5 and the other 10 to show the effect the planer has on the end of the design.
Finally, we've got all 15 end grain pieces done. Now, what we're going to do is slot this wood in between each of the 15 pieces and under it.
So to complete the design, there was one more wood to cut up that was going to go in between and on top of the end grain design. I cut them up into 30 mini strips, 15 of which would go in between the end grain pieces and 15 of which would go under. And the ones that would go under, 5 of them would be glued up, 5 of them would be glued up, and 5 of them would be glued up, and then the remaining 15 would go in slot in between each and every one of the end grain pieces. And after all the cuts and all the planing you just saw, I could finally start to rip through the pieces and add these little strips to the final design. And now with the strips that we're going to sit in between each and every one of the end grain pieces, you can see what I do here now. I'm going to glue all of these pieces up like a big slab and then rip through them horizontally after, but we'll get to that when it comes to that. Okay, finally, now that I've glued each of these 3 slabs up together, I've got 1, 2,
and the third one here. Now we're just going to have to put those mini strips, like I said before, on the bottom of the slab. So I glued this piece up that was going to sit under the slab. And then I had to plane that piece and the slab so that they would glue perfectly together when I eventually glued them together. So after I made second and third of those mini pieces, it was time to actually glue the slab onto the piece. And this is exactly how I did it. Evenly spreading out the glue and then chopping it on and putting like 35 clamps on them. So here I am the next day, chucking the clamps off, getting ready to do the same thing with the second and the third slab. So I've got 1, 2, 3 slabs all done, ready for the end grain, but they're not too pretty. So I had to make some cuts, make them a little bit prettier, and then I was going to plane them and make them perfect, ready for the next part of the project.
And this actually brings us to the final step of making the design. So I'm going to take this first design here and try and build a coffee table.
So I didn't end up actually making a coffee table. I made a chopping board and I gave it to someone that I know. But this is the coolest and the funnest part of the project because you get to finally cut through the design and see the design you made. So I think I had it at 30mm fence and I cut through 18 or 19 pieces and then I made a circular coffee table out of that. And you will see how I did that soon. So creating the design phase is done and now we're going to make the chopping board, and then I'll show you finally how I made that cool product in the thumbnail.
This is what these 13 pieces look like.
So basically I wanted to minimize the amount of design I used. So I carefully chose how I was going to construct and make this into a circle. So to make it a perfect circle, I use this little trick where I drill a hole in the middle and then I rotate the hole around a jig. And you'll see how I do it on the table saw in the next clip. So unfortunately, this part looks really cool, but the camera shut off and basically I slowly made it into a square, into a circle. From a square into a circle.
My camera cut off and I missed most of the process of me making it a circle and sanding it, which was the exciting part, but this is what it looks like so far. Still got some sanding to do, so I'll film that.
After I turned it into a circle, it was pretty easy. I just sanded it, varnished it, and really let the colors come out. And I was so surprised about how good it looked. I then finally flipped the board, turned it to the other side, and this is basically what it looked like.
So for the bedside table, I didn't really like the green in this design. I'm gonna change it up a bit. I don't want too much green, which is this wood here, like turns green when you put varnish on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a nicer wood in between each of these slots, under it, and then cover it with the green wood. Let's see how that looks.
In between each of the end grains, I put the new pine strips. Now that I've done the in-betweens, I'm doing the underneaths. Glued up the base, glued the new pine strips, and then finally I glued the top.
I'm going to glue this onto this onto this, plane each of the pieces, and then glue them all
So
together.
I went through the same process that I did before at the start of the video when I was joining up everything together. I sanded everything, glued everything together, clamped it, cut it perfectly, and then got ready to cut through the design horizontally. And yeah.
Alright, so now I'm super excited. I'm finally going to be cutting this end grain. Ooh, doesn't look that nice. But cutting this end grain right here. I want to show you guys what the design's going to look like. These 5 pieces at the top, these 5 pieces aside, another 5 pieces another side, and then I'll make some drawers. And let's get to work. The rest of this off to 24mm. Let's go.
I've got the top, one of the sides, and the other side.
let's straighten them up and glue them together. Got the sides and the top all glued up. I've got these 3 boards, the top and the sides, and I'm just cutting a 45-degree miter on all of them to make sure they glue up nice. We've got the sides and the top. We've got the 45-degree miter that I've made on the top. Now I'm going to make a 45-degree miter on the sides. The 45-degree cut on all 3 of them. Just going to make the base and the back. So I'm going to use this wood for the base and the back.
The base in the back, I wanted to make sure everything was 90 degrees, so I chopped it up on the table saw, making it act like a jointer.
I'm going to cut off a 45-degree miter on the top of each piece, and you'll see why.
So for the back of this piece here, each side I'm going to cut a 45-degree miter to fit it perfect like that. Let's go. So while I'm waiting for the bottom to get all glued up, we're at the front, having a shelf here and 2 mini doors that open up like that, but with this design. We'll try that out. This means that I'm going to have 11 millimeters for these cuts. I want to have little mini doors with this design here. Open up like that. I think it'd be really cool. And then I have another door here. And then I'm going to have a shelf in the middle. For the doors to operate perfectly, I need to cut it at 130 millimeters. So it's time to cut these at 135. Let's go.
I'm going to quickly glue all these pieces up.
But in case you forgot, I hadn't done the base. So I cut the miters on the base and then glued it up to the actual piece.
So these guys, they're going to act as the doors. I'm going to quickly explain here how I got the door handles on the door.
So I've put on 3 of the doors, and this one door, I've made marks of there and there is where I'm going to drill some holes. Well, finally, I'll just leave you some shots. Got the circular board here looking fantastic. And the bedside table. Got the lights inside, lights all around it. Looks pretty good. I think the next project's going to be better, cooler, and better made. So stick around, subscribe, do all that, and I'll see you in the next one.